All right, guys. Once again, it's Kennard Burner Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger. War Eagle, the biggest game of the year in a lot of ways. Auburn taking on LSU. We've talked about this ad nauseum all week, and we're not going to stop. Matter of fact, we got a few more things we got going on today before it's over. But I want to go ahead and put this one out there. We're going to talk about some things that I think can help Auburn, and it's more so from a statistical standpoint. I'm not going to bore you with the whole who has to have a breakout game and, you know, this is it, this particular player's time to break out. But we're going to crunch some numbers and really look at what Auburn is up against when you talk about facing a team like LSU, especially on the offensive side of the football field for LSU. Now, to start with, a lot of folks are thinking, man, I think Auburn definitely would have a chance, but what Bo Nix is going to show up? Now, we do know if the Bo Nix that showed up at Florida shows up, we're not going to go into the stats, but everybody can look at the video footage. It just wasn't good for him. Had a couple of interceptions, just really some misreads, some missed opportunities in that particular game. And you got to hope that those have been corrected over the last few weeks. This will be the second really hostile environment, quote unquote, that he will be going to. It's a daytime game, 3:30 Eastern time in Baton Rouge, expecting about 50% chance of rain. But either way, Bo Nix really, in my opinion, just shouldn't have to throw more than, say, 25 times in order to have some effectiveness in this game. I think when you start getting up into the 30s, into the 40s, that's when you realize there's something that definitely has to happen for Auburn. That's when you realize the running game is not working. Gus Malzahn wants to run the football. Matter of fact, he's got to. Here's why. Teams have been one-dimensional against LSU, and usually when you have a team that has statistically the great offense that LSU has and pretty athletic on defense, it creates an interesting level of anxiety to where it causes, kind of ironic, LSU is basically one-dimensional on purpose, though. They pass the ball a lot. But they also equally opposite make their opponent one-dimensional in trying to do what they do. And you can't do what LSU does. Your schematics doesn't call for it, and it's just not going to work. Here's what Auburn has in their favor. I think Auburn has a solid enough personnel in their running game to really do something that other teams against LSU have not been successful at, either because A, they're too far behind, or B, that anxiety causes them to lose patience with the running game. Most SEC teams historically are typically not equipped to be in a scoring match, especially with a team like LSU or with the way Alabama has been in recent history. But Auburn's got to run the football between B.J. Williams, Harold Joyner, Sean Shivers, Cam Martin, Malik Miller. They got to run the ball. And Auburn was actually successful against LSU within the last two times they played. Arguably should have won both games. In 2017, Kerryon Johnson had multiple carries for like 156 yards. Very, very effective. Boobie Whitlow had a very, very interesting and a very, very effective 104-yard game against LSU last year. That's when we started to feel like, hey, Boobie Whitlow is the guy. This year, in my opinion, I think between all the running backs that touch the football, Auburn needs about 250 yards. And the reason why I think you need that is, one, you want to maintain a certain level of control of the football game. I'm not talking about just time of possession, because against a team like LSU, and I'm going to show you why in a few minutes, time of possession is not necessarily something that you should gauge your success by, because LSU only had 21 minutes of time of possession, but still beat Florida 42-28. So let's go on and get time of possession out of the way. Okay. What you got to have is you got to have sustained drives. You have to have an effective zone read. I think Bo Nix can do just enough, kind of like what he did against Mississippi State, against Arkansas, do just enough to be effective in zone read to where he has to be accounted for. I like it. 4 or 5 yards, 3, 4, 5, 6 yards on the run pass option. I mean, that zone read, all for it. So that's one thing where Bo Nix can be a little bit more effective. And he seems to create his rhythm based on that zone read. That seems to be more of his element. Number 2, Gus Malzahn did some good personnel stuff by putting Anthony Schwartz and Seth Williams in the right directions, but you're going to need more than 2 receivers. And you got more than 2 receivers. You got Eli Stove, you have Will Hastings, and I really like Sal Cannella, also like J.J. Wilson catching the ball as well. So you got weapons there. But you got to utilize it, and you also have to change the narrative in one particular down. 3rd down and 2 or less has not been good for Auburn. The reason why I'm really not confident with this down is because, one, if you don't get it, a lot of times Auburn is actually in the other team's plus territory. If you don't get it on 3rd down, usually it's going to be a 4th and 1 to where you're tempted to go for it. And what has happened is they haven't even made it, the formations and the play calls, they haven't been able to convert. So a concerted effort to get the ball. I mean, and I'm talking about just get up on the center and run the football or run the quarterback sneak. Get it on 3rd down and 2. You got to have it. You can't be in a situation where you're trying to make a decision because of a missed opportunity and you want to keep the ball. You don't want to give it back to LSU. You got to convert on 3rd and short. Hurt them against Georgia last year. Hurt them somewhat even against Arkansas this year. Hurt them definitely against Alabama. You don't want to continue that trend. That trend has to end this particular weekend. Also, when you talk about offense, you got to limit the penalties. There have been some crucial plays with Auburn's offense. It hasn't been so much here lately, but there have been some crucial plays where rhythm is going and then you have a false start, or you have a substitution error, or you have a formation type deal, or you have a legal man downfield. So those things definitely have to be eliminated as well. Now, I think if Auburn can get some balance on offense, can get some rhythm to where they don't feel that pressure or feel that anxiety, especially if you get behind by 2 scores, that's something that doesn't need to happen because the anxiety is definitely going to kick in and you're going to be tempted to have to put the ball in the air. And at this point, I still don't think that's Bo Nix's strong point. Bailed Auburn out against Oregon, but wasn't quite as fortunate against Florida. So it's going to be crucial that Auburn stays within range and don't get themselves behind to where the playbook has to be offset. All right. On defense, this is something that a lot of people feel kind of good about as it relates to Auburn, especially Auburn's front 7. You talk about a bunch of guys that really know how to get after the quarterback. Joe Burrow is a guy that has had plenty of time for the most part. Mississippi State did have a little success getting to him, but that's not the point here. We know the defense has to get pressure. We know that the secondary has to play sound. We know they have to keep everything in front of them. But just to bring some perspective as to what really absolutely has to happen. Joe Burrow, as one of the best quarterbacks statistically in the country right now, is throwing 79%. He's converting 79% of his passes. That's absolutely lethal. He has 2,400 yards compared to, this is just mid-season now. Well, a little past mid-season, but this is just past mid-season. Last year around this time, well, actually, last year to finish the season, he had 2,800. So he's well on pace to surpass that. Another thing is he's got 29 touchdowns. That means he's averaging well over 4 TDs a game. So another stat is Joe Burrow actually has 12.2 yards per reception. And another dangerous thing is each game he has his longest pass is 56 yards on average. That's huge. When you're able to have at least one play, and not counting all the other nickel and dime plays like your 35s here, your 25s there, 15s here, all discouraging the defense, and then you pop them for 56 yards. So here is one area statistically where Auburn can kind of divert this. Okay, so instead of Joe Burrow being allowed to throw 12.2 yards on average, Auburn actually has improved in this area. They only allow about 6.03 yards per game so far. I don't think that's a realistic stat for you to expect that against a team like LSU. What I'm looking at is instead of Joe Burrow being allowed to throw 12.2 yards per pass, I think you need to condense that down to about 10, maybe even 9.8 in this. And that's factoring not allowing so many big plays. Another thing, too, is with LSU, you got to make them earn it. Got to make them earn it. I'm going to use real quickly as a sample size the Alabama game from last year. First half, I think Auburn came out with a nice game plan. It was even a situation where it was the first time that Alabama had been forced to 2 consecutive 3-and-outs. Okay? Second half comes. This is where the make them earn it part really just turned into a debacle. Now, in the first half, Alabama had a couple of drives, a touchdown drive, and 3 field goals. Okay? Here's the thing. This is what made this, no, actually 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Here's the thing. This is what made this so unique in the tale of 2 games, so to speak, with the Iron Bowl from last year. In the first half, Auburn made Alabama's offense stay on the field way longer than they did in the second half in scoring drives. In the first half, Alabama was on the had at least 5 plays in their drives. Also, took up about 4 minutes of time of possession. That's how you keep yourself in the game. Don't give up the big plays. Like I said, you got to make them earn it. Auburn made them earn it. Halftime score is 17-13. Making them earn it. Only problem is, in making them earn it, Alabama was making Auburn earn it too. And also, you took away a touchdown. That was a holding call. I'll give Sal Cannella this. It was a holding call, but I've seen some teams get away with way different. But we're not going to go there today. Second half. This is where things got real tricky. Auburn couldn't get things going offensively. Finished up with, I think, only about 200 and something yards. And here's where things got nasty for Auburn. Jerry Jeudy, Devonta Smith, Henry Ruggs, Devin Waddell had a field day with Auburn's secondary that second half. 1, they were able to hit on big plays. 2, Auburn didn't make them earn it. Let me tell you how. Compared to the first half where Auburn made Alabama at least, surrender about, 5 plays, 6 plays per drive, second half totally different. Alabama averaged about 2 plays per drive on at least 4 drives, 5 drives maybe, and big plays of 46, 30, 25, things like that. And what happens is the game gets away from you real quick. They're able to score on 1-play drives, 2-play drives. Your offense comes back 3-and-out. Then they hit you for another 2, and the game gets out of hand that quick. The score was 31-21 midway through the third quarter. And the onslaught began, and next thing you know, you go to get a beer out of your refrigerator. You come back, the game is 52-21. That's something that Auburn has to take into account. Now, the good news is Auburn really surveyed this during the offseason. Kevin Steele said, well, look, in order for us to be successful, we have got to only allow offenses 3.3 yards per game. I think any good company, any good team, when you're setting a goal, you want to be specific about your goal, and you got to understand the consequences of it. Auburn allowed 3.7 yards rushing last year, and by this time, they were already out of contention for anything. Auburn flipped the narrative this year, only allowing 3.1 yards per carry and only 6.3 yards per pass. You're 6-1 and in a position to be in the driver's seat in the SEC West with the win over LSU. So I'm not sure what Kevin Steele and his staff's individual goals are, but if it were me, I'm looking at maintaining the 3.1 yards per carry, but just being realistic, you're not going to get, I just don't think you can contain LSU to 6.03 yards per pass. But I do think 9 or maybe 10 yards per pass completed is realistic. And it can really pay dividends, because that means some of the long passes are not being converted on. Also, special teams is definitely key. Got to make sure you field the punts. Last time Auburn was on the road in a hostile environment, Christian Tuck fumbled the ball, punt return in plus territory. Those are key possessions that you got to have. All right, guys. This was my synopsis of what some of the stuff that Auburn has to do to make this a football game, which I think it will be, always is. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.